get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Ditch Diggers Dialogue Volume 15. My name is Ashley Hudson. I'm the Operations Manager with the Heavy Construction Contractors Association. If this is your first time tuning into a Ditch Diggers Dialogue, welcome. HDCA strives to provide educational and networking opportunities for our membership, so we created the Ditch Diggers Dialogue series as a virtual way to stay connected. From misutility to digging with care, Virginia has set a national standard with their accomplishments in damage prevention. Through historical partnerships and groundbreaking legislation, Virginia has reduced the damage rate nearly 80%, from 4.49 gas damages per 1,000 gas tickets to 0.98 since 1996. Joining us today from Virginia 811, we have Steve Light, the head of Stakeholder Engagement. Steve has worked with 811 for 20 years, and as a representative of Virginia 811, he assists stakeholders throughout the Commonwealth with their public awareness and damage prevention efforts. Steve is a member of the Virginia Damage Prevention Advisory Committee and has been involved in the development of many damage prevention initiatives. Today, he will share the history and the future of damage prevention in Virginia. During today's session, we ask that you keep your microphones muted until we open the floor for questions. If you have questions or thoughts as we move through the presentation, I encourage you to type them in the chat box as we go, so they can be addressed at the end of the presentation. Now I will turn it over to Steve. Thank you for being here with us today, and the floor is yours.
All right, well, thank you, Ashley, and thanks everyone for taking a few minutes to spend with us. While I look as old as dirt, I'm not quite as old as I look, and certainly some of what I'll be going through is some history stuff. I haven't been around for all of it, but certainly the last 20 years, there have been a lot of exciting things that have happened here in Virginia as far as damage prevention is concerned. So I'll talk about that at a very high level. Also want to focus on Common Ground Alliance, the international organization that's involved in the damage prevention efforts and some of the things that they're helping to initiate as far as moving forward with what they're calling their Next Practices Initiative. And then finally, I suspect many of you are aware of Virginia 811 and some of the opportunities that we offer, but in the event that you're not, just at a quick high level, I will hit those, some of those options for you as well. I do want to mention too, Ashley mentioned in the bio that I happen to serve on the Damage Prevention Advisory Committee. I want to point out as well, Chris Mabe with HCCA member B&B Signal also serves on the committee, and there are some other Northern Virginia representation with Washington Gas, Scott Brown, and Juan Vogel with Utiliquest. So all of us stakeholders working together to try to continue the efforts of the momentum that we've had for quite a while now. Well, let's talk history for a moment. And I don't think any of us are around when this happened, but this is looking back at 1848. This picture is representation of Summit's Mill in California in 1848 when gold was discovered and the California Gold Rush began in 1848. Another thing that happened in 1848, Wisconsin became the 30th state of the Union. A little closer to home, the Washington Monument was established. The cornerstone of Washington Monument was laid on July 4th of 1848, and you'll forgive me for looking to the side. I'm having to look at some notes because I'm not quite that good with my memory. But construction on the monument was delayed for 23 years due to funding issues and this little thing called the Civil War, or the war between the states, depending on your preference. The monument finally was completed in 1884 and then dedicated in 1885, but its cornerstone, its birth, if you will, was in 1848. And more in line with who all we are and what we do, Washington Gas was founded in 1848. In fact, they have the distinction of being the first utility of any sort that was chartered by Congress. Their charter was issued just a few days after that Washington Monument cornerstone was laid. And as you see, they were the ones who became the first of the present day utilities that were located in the District of Columbia, as well as in the greater metropolitan DC area. Columbia Gas has a lot of facilities in Northern Virginia as well, particularly in Prince William County and getting down in the southern part of Northern Virginia, so to speak. They, while not in the Northern Virginia footprint, they have a similar start time in more in Central Virginia, Petersburg, Richmond in an 1847, 18. Well over 200 years ago. Now let's just move forward real quick and enjoy the Roadrunner. I'm going to fast forward. I couldn't come up with a clock spinning, so we'll do the Roadrunner for those of you who are old school like me and can remember seeing that character as a kid. Fast forward, turning the clock forward to 1970. At this time in history, we were seeing the establishment of call centers in different parts of the United States. Those centers were regional, and they were done as a way to help make it easier for excavators in a way to protect underground utilities. The idea was giving them the option to make one call, so that whole concept ended up being known as the one call industry or the one call process. Excavators could make one call to contact multiple utilities as opposed to calling each utility for information, which you can imagine that would have been quite a time-consuming process and a lot of back and forth, potentially with missed phone calls, technology not being as good then as it was now, or is now rather. Could lead to some issues and delays in getting those markings on the ground. I mentioned the example of Houston. This is a very interesting example. Houston had a center that established in the late 60s, early 70s, and it was called the hottest little number in town. My former colleague, Dave Price, who retired from Virginia 811 in 2013, and prior to that worked for 30 years and retired from Washington Gas. He was quite a historian in the whole misutility process, and in full credit, a lot of this older information that I have access to is thanks to Dave and the research that he did. There are articles that we have in our system from the Washington Post from the early 70s, where the Houston example is indicated as a huge spotlight by someone with the Federal Department of Transportation. They point to Houston because of the creative advertising that they did. The hottest little number in town featured photo ads and video ads of a blonde woman, scantily clad, wearing multiple layers of clothes, and she would remove a layer from time to time, and each layer had different colors, of course, the different colors representing the utility types. In our world today in 2021, I can only imagine the backlash for a federal official, encouraging more advertising like that. But use that as an example to show that even 50 years ago now, there were different things that were being done to help try to spread the message about the importance of the presence of underground utilities and knowing where they were. Here in Virginia, the process started in 1971. It started in your area, in Northern Virginia, Maryland, and of course into the district. They used the slogan, "To miss the utilities, call Miss Utility before you dig." There have been lots of parts of the state, the Commonwealth, who have thought Miss Utility was a person, and thankfully there's not. I can't tell you about all the times that I have been to different meetings or businesses, and they expected to see some nice looking woman coming in as Miss Utility, and they are sadly represented when they get me instead. So, but the Miss Utility, again, not referring to a person, but to a concept about missing the utilities. That started with 4 utilities in Northern Virginia. I'm trying to remember, I think Fairfax County was the 4th, but the other 3 were Virginia Electric Power Company, now known as Dominion Energy, Washington Gas, and then of course C&P Telephone. And I would be remiss if I did not let you know that my mother is a veteran of the old C&P Telephone, retired from then Bell Atlantic in the mid 80s, but C&P Telephone helped put a lot of food on our table and clothes on our backs, and helped pay for college and things like that too. So always have to throw in that particular reference. Concept then was not 800 numbers toll-free dialing, but a collect call. So folks who wanted to get their utilities marked dialed a collect number to reach Miss Utility at that point. The process obviously was working well, and then was replicated in other parts of Virginia. First, around 1975, a Miss Utility of Tidewater was formed, and because of the success that they had, they opened a second center in the Richmond area in 1976. However, even in spite of there being now 3 centers in Virginia that again are all regionally based, there continued to be some problems with accidents that were happening that indicated that more needed to be done than just having these voluntary call centers. As you see, at this time, making the phone call was voluntary. Excavators could do it if they chose to, they didn't have to. And utilities weren't required at that time to be members and participate in the process with the call center. So someone might be diligent and make the call to get information, but then not get the information for all of the utilities who were associated. A couple accidents that took place around this time included an accident in Northern Virginia in Annandale in the early 70s, where a house exploded, a mother and her 2 young children were all killed. And then in 1977 in Richmond, a 34,000 volt electric cable was hit. Fortunately, the person operating the backhoe was only slightly burned. However, one of his coworkers who was on the ground was severely burned and had to be hospitalized. So accidents happened, and I forgot, to point out that in the early 70s, there were multiple situations that happened across the United States that were large explosions with gas facilities being damaged and people being killed. All of these things are helping to build the momentum to see what can be done to help improve this process. So in the late 70s, 1977, a committee of stakeholders was formed to come up with ideas of what could be done to create legislation to make this process better. And that legislation is something that many of us are familiar with, the Virginia Underground Utility Damage Prevention Act. It became law on July 1st, 1979. The law has been amended multiple times since that point. Even though it became law in 1979, in the early 90s, federal government pointed out that there wasn't the ability for anyone to be able to enforce that law. So in the early 90s, a task force was put together to come up with things that could be added to the law to make the law more effective and to improve the different aspects of the law. That law took effect in July of 1995, those amendments, excuse me, and those things include giving the State Corporation Commission the ability to enforce the law. In addition to that, the positive response system was created. At that time, it was called the TIE system, which stands for Ticket Information Exchange System. But the ability for utility operators to let excavators know what to expect when they arrive on the job site. And of course, the importance of excavators having that information to give them clues as to what they needed to be looking for when it came to marking when they arrived on the job site. The addition of 3-hour notice tickets and the requirement for excavators to be doing a site inspection, looking for clear evidence of an unmarked utility. That was added as an extra level of safety to help not only prevent damages to the underground utilities, but to help protect the workers who are doing the particular work and the folks who live and work around those particular utilities. And we talked about the advisory committee earlier. The advisory committee was established and added as part of the process in 1995. I've got a graph I'll show you in a little bit that shows the trending that Ashley referred to a little while ago. But 1995 is considered, quote unquote, the beginning of the modern age as far as damage prevention in Virginia, because once enforcement became part of the process, then that's where progress really started to happen. There were some major changes to the law that took effect in 2002. That included chiefly the change in timing for the waiting period. Prior to 2002, an excavator called in a ticket and had to wait 48 hours based on business days for a response. So a ticket that's called in at 10:15 a.m. on Tuesday, locators would respond by 10:15 a.m. on Thursday morning. There were issues with that, obviously, and so with the change that took effect in 2002, took it to the clock beginning at 7 a.m. on the next working day after the ticket has been called in or entered, or after the notification center has been notified. So in this case, a ticket called in today, the 48-hour waiting period would start tomorrow morning at 7 a.m. and then the responses and the marking should be completed by 7 a.m. on Friday morning. The trade-off for adding that extra piece of the waiting period was the part of the law that allows excavators that if they, at the time they make the call, receive word from Virginia 811 that no utilities are being notified, they can start working immediately. Also, if the positive response information comes back early before that due date or in time, they can start work right away as long as things are all marked and clear and there's no issue related to the ticket. So all of that took effect at that point. I will add parenthetically that Virginia 811 started doing operation in 2002, and I've got more on that here in just a moment. And we started on July 1st of 2002, which was a Monday, and it was the same time that this went into effect. So folks calling in tickets on Monday the 8th for their tickets to be ready according to the waiting period, because Thursday was the July 4th Independence holiday. And that year, July 5th was Friday, was declared a state holiday by the governor. And it all clearly, because people were calling in tickets and having to wait a full week, it had to be our fault because we were the new center, even though it just happened to coincide our starting to take tickets with when the law changed. I was around for this. Now we're getting to history that I can recall, and that was quite a difficult week for us. But other things that you see that were added to the law in 2002, the designer ticket and special project tickets. Neither of these tickets have really taken off as far as their use, but they are things that do have value if excavators choose to use them. The requirement that any utilities that were installed after July 1st of 2002, they had to be installed in a way that they could be locatable. And the piece in the law that requires utilities to be installed at certain depths that match up with national standards. And again, that is based on at the time that the utilities are installed. In addition to those pieces, the State Corporation Commission has the ability to promulgate rules of enforcement. Promulgate's a fancy legal word for create and announce. They can't just create these rules. They have to make sure that they are broadcast to the public, to the stakeholder community, so that folks are aware of those. But these rules are things that are set up to help with the enforcement of the Damage Prevention Act. And you see some examples of some of those rules here, including a definition of clear evidence. And then one of the more recent additions, some attempts made about 6 years ago to better define or delineate what specific location means as far as the law is concerned. And then in addition to that, the commission has established rules of certification for the notification center. This has standards for Virginia 811 or anyone else who might come along who takes on that notification process, that requires us to do things in a timely manner, that if we don't, we're subject to penalties, just as excavators who don't follow the Damage Prevention Act, they're subject to those penalties as well. And utility operators have requirements, and locators have requirements. But we have requirements too. They relate to the delivery of tickets in a timely manner. They also relate to our average speed of answer. We are required to maintain a 99% or better customer satisfaction rate. It always amuses me to hear Geico and others brag about their 92% customer satisfaction rate. We have maintained 99% or better the entire time that we have been in existence. And it has been since 2016 where our quarterly survey has been below 100%. And even then it was at 99.5%. So we have rules we have to follow too. Here's the visual of what Ashley talked about earlier. This is where you see here in the quote unquote modern age, once enforcement started happening, you see the progress that was been made, nearly an 80% drop in reported damages to gas utilities. One caveat with the commission's gas data, and this is damage data from the State Corporation Commission. This is the official data as far as Virginia is concerned. The Damage Prevention Act requires the gas operators and the operators of the hazardous liquid pipeline facilities to report all of their damages. Any other utility damages or violations of the Damage Prevention Act are voluntary as far as reporting. So the only certainty or consistency that we've seen in reporting for the last, what's that, 35 years, right? 25 years, excuse me, has been that gas utilities have been required to report all their damages. So in the interest of consistency, the SEC continues to track gas damages per 1,000 gas tickets, or tickets that gas operators are notified on. But still, an 80% drop over all this time is an outstanding tribute to all of us who've been involved in this process. Certainly, enforcement has been a big piece, and it's helped keep Virginia out in front. Many states have not had the enforcement at the level that Virginia has. There are states that are catching up with us now on that piece, but while that has been a factor, there have been other pieces that have contributed as well, including education. There's more and more opportunities that the state provides, that Virginia 811 provides, that HCCA provides, that you all as HCCA members provide to your employees on the Damage Prevention Act, on safe digging practices, on working with utilities to recognize different utility facilities and things like that. All of that education has helped. There has been a host of cooperation and partnership among stakeholders on damage prevention activities. We've partnered with HCCA and had our display truck at several of your events. A number of the members work with us in partnering on or giving us the opportunity to work with you to provide training on the Damage Prevention Act. We've done that as well with utility operators. We've also had partnerships with utilities and locators and the excavating community too, to help provide funding or provide person power at different events. We have, prior to COVID, been a regular at the Celebrate Fairfax event, for example. And it's not just been Virginia 811 folks at our booth there, but Fairfax Water has stopped by and visited. Washington Gas has been there helping us. Utiliquest has been there helping us. These partnership efforts, all of these things combined, enforcement's been important, but in my opinion, enforcement helped get all of us together, working together on the same page to make the progress that we've had. And in full disclosure, the SEC has not just been the bully with the cop with the badge. The SEC, they have been great partners along the way in helping us with their person power and trying to help with putting things together to make the process better. So a lot of folks, a lot of effort, a lot of hours are responsible for this reduction in damages. And to our knowledge, Virginia is the first state to dip below that 1 damages per 1,000 tickets. So that's something that we all can be very proud of. Having said that, just show you some more up-to-date damage data. This is looking at data from the calendar year 2020. First, when you look at total damages by location, Fairfax County is off the charts. This is a little misleading because when you look at ticket volume, Fairfax County leads the way as well and has more than double the ticket volume for Fairfax County alone that you see in any other municipality. So basically, with the exception, Roanoke County is the outlier on this particular chart. These others you would see: Virginia Beach, Norfolk, Chesapeake, Newport News, Prince William, Arlington. A lot of those would still be higher on the list if we were looking at this as a graph indicating ticket volume. But while Fairfax County is higher in volume, when we look at things from a locality damages per 1,000 tickets, you don't see Fairfax County show up at all. While there are more opportunities for damages in Fairfax County because of increased excavation activity, the damages in relation to the amount of work that's being done is significantly lower than it is in a lot of these other places. So the converse is true here. What you're seeing, for the most part, areas that have a higher damage rate damages per 1,000 tickets are smaller areas that typically don't have quite the ticket volume that a Fairfax or Virginia Beach or Loudoun County would have. So two different ways to look at things and to identify areas that could use some help as far as some public awareness activity is concerned. So just a couple of different ways that we look at things as far as that's concerned. Now, root cause, what's happening, what is ultimately determined as the cause of the damages. Sad to say, failure to call continues to be one of the biggest issues, even though the total number of damages are staying about the same or decreasing based on from year to year basis. As a percentage of the total damages, failure to call continues to remain high. You see as well for excavators, failure to protect the the marked utility runs at about 24%, and utility operator and locating failures running at 24% as well. So those pieces of the puzzle seem to remain pretty constant as we go from year to year, although the overall damage situation continues to decrease. So it shows us both sides of the coin. We're making progress, we're doing good things, we're reducing damages, but there still are some areas that continue to need attention here in Virginia. Now, just a very brief history about Virginia 811. I already mentioned that we started operations on July 1st of 2002. Our official company name, Virginia Utility Protection Service. Prior to us, there were 2 call centers in Virginia, and I'll show you a map here in a minute that reflects that. Those call centers, the certificates to those centers were owned by associations of utilities. There was a group called Virginia Underground Utility Protection Service that took care of the utilities in one part of the state, and the Northern Virginia Utility Protection Service, who took care of Northern Virginia and the Eastern Shore. Those two groups together were dealing with separate vendors, and they had the vision to create VUPS, ultimately Virginia 811, as one organization, one notification center that would provide service to all of the Commonwealth of Virginia. So in 2002, we started providing service for the area, basically from Fredericksburg south, and then in 2003 throughout all of Virginia. We are certificated by the State Corporation Commission, and as I mentioned earlier, they have rules that apply to us that we're responsible for living up to. We're not a state organization at all. We are a separate 501c6 organization, which I suspect HCCA falls into that category as well. We're a business league, if you will, of our member utilities. So our role is to work together with the utilities to provide them the notification service. But if you've been around us for anything, we're not just member oriented, we're stakeholder oriented. We partner together with anybody who's involved in the 811 process, because ultimately our belief is, and my belief personally, that as we're working together, we make the process better, we make things safer for everybody involved. As far as the Damage Prevention Act is concerned, we're the notification center, and I expect this crowd is smart enough to know that we're not the ones who mark utilities. It's the utility operators and their contract locators who do that, but we don't mark that. And wanted to throw in, excited to share that we've been members of HCCA since 2006, and certainly applaud many of the efforts all of the efforts, I should say, that HCCA has done in representing the excavator community and continuing to provide new opportunities for growth and education for the membership. Here's that map I referenced. This is what Virginia looked like when we started in 2002. This image is actually from an excavator manual that was printed in 2001. If you worked there along the Rappahannock River area, or if you worked on both sides, or in the black or the white, you had four different phone numbers you had to remember. The numbers at the top were for calling in your tickets. You called one number for the southern part of Virginia and another number for northern Virginia and the eastern shore. And then the numbers at the bottom were for the TIE system or the positive response system, a separate number that you had to call in order to check positive response. Of course, now there's one number that you call for throughout Virginia, 811, and you can even use that one number and follow the prompts to reach our positive response if you need to do that. Another interesting piece before we move on to Common Ground Alliance. When we started in 2002, we had one individual who was trained in using our web ticket entry application. I was involved in doing the training, and it was a person who worked for an excavating company here in Roanoke. We now regularly receive 70% of our tickets through various online internet applications that we have. And I'll talk about those here in just a few minutes. But it's interesting to see the growth, how we've gone from that place to where we are now. With routinely averaging over 100,000 tickets a month throughout the state. And just earlier this year had an all-time high of over 150,000 tickets processed here in Virginia. Common Ground Alliance is a wonderful organization who are involved in things on a bigger scale, on a national and truly international level. Common Ground Alliance ended up being created as a result of a common ground study. This study was authorized by Congress through legislation that took effect in 1998. And basically, it was recognizing the fact that there are multiple damage prevention laws. Each state has their own law, and many of the laws are better than others. And so Congress wanted this common ground study to come together under the auspices of the Federal Department of Transportation to identify what works and what doesn't work. And so ultimately, those stakeholders work together to create a report that if you Google Common Ground Study, you can see my memory is it was over 200 pages, the report that was put out by the Department of Transportation that was the result of this particular effort. But ultimately, what came about was in that report, the identification of some best practices. And what was done during that time was various stakeholders were involved in creating those best practices, and there had to be consensus amongst all the stakeholder groups in order for something to be approved as a best practice. If there was no consensus, then that best practice was not agreed upon and was not included. So a really great concept for what they've done. As a result of the Common Ground study and the report, CGA then was incorporated in 2000. They initially were incorporated in Washington, D.C. They have their headquarters in Alexandria, and they are a truly international member-driven organization who work together ultimately to help prevent damages to underground utilities. They are as well another 501c6 member-driven organization. And I keep saying international organization because they truly are. While most of the membership involves stakeholders throughout the United States, there are a number of Canadian CGA members. There are folks from New Zealand, Australia. We have had at the CGA conference and various CGA events, activities, damage prevention stakeholders from Great Britain, from France, and even from Peru participate in some of their efforts. So CGA has really done a wonderful job in trying to keep the momentum going. Virginia was fortunate enough because of our environment here with the way our law being as robust as it was, the enforcement piece, the qualifications and the operations of the notification center and the different technologies that we've employed to make it easier and better for all stakeholders, and the partnership efforts amongst the folks doing the work, the utility operators, the excavators, and the locators. We were identified in the mid-2000s as a model one-call state, and many of the things that we've done are included in the best practices, but there are best practices that even go beyond some of the things that we've done. The best practices continue to be one of the hallmarks of what CGA does. Some of you may be familiar with their best practices. There's a manual that you could receive a hard copy version of. There's also an online PDF version too that can be downloaded that folks can review. But this looks at identifying what are the best practices that folks should try to adopt in their states in order to improve their damage prevention process. Another thing that you might be familiar with from CGA is 811. It was Common Ground Alliance who helped implement 811 as that national 3-digit dialing option for folks before they excavate. Another great thing that CGA does is create what's called the DIRT report. Every year, damages are shared with CGA so that trending can be identified for issues that need to be worked on a national level. And in the early 2000s, the data showed very clearly that 50% of the damages nationally were being done because of a failure to call. So the implementation of 811 helped make it easier for that 3-digit dialing for folks, no matter what state they're in, to call 811 and reach the notification center that provides the service for that particular state. So if you don't know the best practices, you certainly know what 811 is all about. Well, next practices is a really cool initiative that CGA is involved with now. And I think this is more future looking and something that I'm personally really excited about. CGA started this initiative last year in trying to identify where do we need to go as far as moving forward. For the most part, in the damage prevention industry, the low-hanging fruit has been picked to help reduce damages. What can be done to help us as an industry of damage prevention professionals to move forward, to bring in not just a new generation of innovative solutions, but as new generations of employees are brought in, bringing in solutions that help identify with them. Certainly, younger adults are, in some cases, a little more technologically savvy than some older folks. That's not always the case. But there need to be some new thoughts, potentially some new ideas, some new technologies that could be incorporated as far as being able to move forward. So CGA created this Next Practices Advisory Committee and did so by looking at a lot of different aspects. They used data from research, industry surveys that were done, and the DIRT report that I alluded to just a few minutes ago, to try to come up with what are some of the key issues that we as damage prevention stakeholders need to be looking at as far as taking that next step in reducing damages. And their data reflected things in these 4 categories. And interestingly, the national data matches up very closely to what we see with the Virginia data, with 29% of the national data being due to the fact that folks didn't have tickets at all. That 14% of invalid use of request relates to things like what we in Virginia have identified as over notification, where someone calls in a ticket and they don't start work in the time that's required by law, or they've completed work, but they continue to update a ticket to keep fresh paint marks on the ground, and they're taxing the system and not excavating, even though they're still keeping that ticket active, or calling in a ticket that is a full mile long, but not excavating over that entire area and only excavating in a 300-foot area. The locator still has to mark that entire mile. So all of those things that we call over notification in Virginia are part of this invalid use of request. But you see things that were identified here. Again, the trending nationally looks very similar to what we've seen in Virginia. So certainly there's value, I think, in what CGA is doing with this. We had Sarah Magruder-Lyle, their president and CEO, speak on this very thing, their Next Practices Initiative and report. She spoke at our quarterly membership meeting, which we held last Wednesday. And it's important that we need to be coming up with ways so that ultimately the goal for all of this, the goal for the state law, the Damage Prevention Act, the goal for Virginia 811, the goal for CGA, and certainly the goal for HCCA is to make sure that things are done right and ultimately done in a way that folks can work safely, make money doing what they're doing, but avoid doing damages to underground utilities. because of the health and life impact, as well as the economic and environmental impact that damage to utilities will cause. Here are the three critical issues that the CGA Next Practices Group identified. Facilities not marked accurately and on time. That potentially leads to excavator errors in the field, but those two could be independent of each other. And then the third issue I've talked about already, the effective and consistent use of 811. So related to that, CGA has a technology committee that is looking at trying to recognize, promote, adopt some of the newer technologies that are out there, because there are things that can be done to help improve the damage prevention process. An example of that includes the use of augmented reality, or AR. It's gaining acceptance and use by some utility operators and helping to create records of where their facilities are. Virginia 811 did a pilot project with augmented reality as a piece of the ticket entry process about 2 years ago. There still needs to be a lot widely gained acceptance, but that is an example of the kind of thing that the CGA Technology Committee is looking to help advocate and move forward. They recently released a report with what they called an idealized excavation project for 2030. And if you'll bear with me, I don't like to be somebody who reads every word on every slide, but this, unfortunately, I didn't have images to share from that report. But this, in a nutshell, is what they're advocating in that particular report. So please bear with me. This is an ideal excavation situation 10 years from now or 9 years from now. The first step being the excavator enters an electronic one-call ticket using electronic white lining. That could be white lining that is done by taking a mobile device, a tablet or a smartphone, going to the job site and walking the job site. It could also be doing an online ticketing process like our web ticket entry. But both of those allow the excavator to more narrowly define the scope of excavation as far as the ticket is concerned. That more acceptance of that type of technology was the first step, they said. Secondly, facility operators or locators mark the site on time, that of course is important, and provide electronic positive response. Those of you who work in Northern Virginia are already used to the EPR piece of things. Washington Gas and UtiliQuest helped implement that in 2018, if my memory is correct. And so UtiliQuest provides EPR information for all of their clients in Northern Virginia. I looked at a ticket recently and saw where Dominion Energy, Washington Gas, and I believe it was Cox Communications were all as part of the positive response. The EPR piece that includes information about, in some cases, facility records, in some cases, photos from the job site. That information is created by all utility operators in this idealized situation. Third step is that EPR data has a file that excavators can then take and upload to the excavation machine cab. Hardware, software installed on the bucket, take that data and use it so that it warns the equipment operator when they are within a certain distance of that buried utility. Related to that, critical facilities that are already buried would then have sensors installed so that they could work in conjunction with the hardware, software installed on the excavation equipment that would cause it to stop or freeze if the piece of equipment or the equipment operator is getting too close to that particular critical facility. Next, the software geofences the perimeter of the work site as defined by the drawing or the polygon, if you will, on the one-call ticket, and it alerts the machine operator if they move outside of the scope of that ticket, and potentially can work like we just talked about with providing alerts to facilities that may not be marked but may be outside of that defined scope of the ticket. The software is also something that would be compatible with an inexpensive drone, and EPR would upload to that, so that with a camera view on the drone, someone on the job site or even from a remote destination could be using that software to monitor the machine operation because of the feedback that's being given to it by the drone. If unmarked, mismarked, or abandoned facilities are found during the project, the drone maps them either by using integrated GPR or of course it takes photos of those unmarked facilities. Those then can be provided back to the utility operator, who can verify information on those unmarked utilities and update their GIS systems. And the big piece, ultimately, all utility operators participate in EPR. The bigger players of the world are already starting to participate in EPR. Certainly part of the challenge is going to be getting all stakeholders to utilize that. Municipalities might be a challenge, especially smaller municipalities for sure. The key thing from this report is all of the technology that we just talked about are things that exist now. Virginia 811 in 2007, 2008 did a pilot project as part of what was called the Virginia Pilot Project that proved the concept of electronic white lining, and there are other state centers who are using that kind of technology now. The ability for the equipment to be GPS enabled and have information related to the utility records. We did a successful test with some of that in the about 2010, 2011 timeframe, and more of that technology is getting out. But the challenge is getting all stakeholders to adapt this mindset, to adapt the use of some of these technologies, and to actually utilize them. So, having said that, I'm running a little long. Let me move fast now through some of the Virginia 811 resources. All of these resources are available to you at no charge to use. First, our computer-based training. This is training that you can access online through our website, va811.com. It is the official Dig with Care, Keep Virginia Safe training on the Damage Prevention Act. The training that is approved by the State Corporation Commission. We partnered with the SEC in 2014 to create this training, and it was updated in 2017 and again last year. Certainly encourage you to take advantage of that opportunity if you have not done so. We offer web ticket entry training for folks who want to have the ability to enter their tickets online. Web ticket entry is available 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, and gives you the ability to process the ticket and get your ticket number immediately without having to use any of our damage prevention specialists on the phone, not having to wait to get through to a call. This is an example of our ticket screen and what it looks like. And we also have the use of orthophotography that's available for folks to use as well. The polygon that is drawn here on the map that you see in the center is what creates the list of utilities that would be notified for the particular ticket. We also have something we call our single address tickets. This is something you can access through our website as well. This is an ideal way. It does not require the training that web ticket entry does, but this is a great way to get your ticket processed quick and easy. If you are doing work clearly at a single address at 123 Main Street, for example, if our system gets a match into the mapping, you can get your ticket processed right away without having our involvement. If you're somebody who prefers to call in your tickets, we have an option called Ticket Revision Express, which allows you to go to our website and within a matter of about 30 seconds, process your update and remark ticket online. These are for tickets where work continues to need to be done, but the scope of your work area has not changed. And another thing that I encourage you to take advantage of is our Location Enhanced Ticket Search, or LETS. You can access that by going to va811.com or by going straight to lets.va811.com. Its chief benefit is that it uses the location service on your cell phone to give you a ticket search of things in anywhere from a 250 to 1,000 foot radius of where you're standing. And so you can get a list of active tickets that show up in your area When you click on the ticket number, you will see the positive response information from the utilities who were notified. You also have the ability to see details of the ticket as well as how the ticket was mapped in our system. This is an outstanding resource that a lot of folks take advantage of because it lets utility operators know if someone has a valid ticket or not. It lets excavators know if they have a valid ticket or not. What was the positive response information on the ticket? Are you a general contractor who has subs working for you? You can use this to confirm whether or not your sub has a valid ticket. So it's a great tool. Again, there's no charge for using any of these things. I encourage you to take advantage of all of those. And the last thing I'll mention is the Virginia 811 Academy. You can access that by going to our website and clicking on the big Academy logo that's in the upper right-hand corner of the page. This is an online resource that provides training opportunities for our web ticket entry and a lot of other training videos and tips to help you improve the quality of your web tickets. I will stop here and leave this information on the screen. I've run my yap quite a bit, so I apologize for that, but certainly am open to any questions about any of what I said. One of the things Ashley didn't mention in telling you a little bit about me, I do profess to have a law degree from the Holiday Inn Express. So I do know a few things about the Damage Prevention Act and the rules of enforcement, and might be able to help answer some questions about any of the process or law stuff too. So with that, Ashley and Ken, thank you very much for the opportunity. And if any of the attendees have questions I might be able to answer, I'm willing to give it a shot.
Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. It was wonderful. I don't have any questions. I think you covered everything above and beyond.
Wonderful. That's a stunner. That's a stunner.
Yeah, thank you, Steve, for that information-packed presentation. I really enjoyed hearing about the history and where we're going from there. Are there any questions on the line? I see a couple people unmuting themselves.
Yeah, Steve, this is Courtney Tolson. I've got a question. Where do you see the trend going? Do you believe that Virginia can get as low as, I don't know, 0.5 damages per 1,000 tickets? Where do you see us actually going with that number there?
Yeah, Courtney, that's a great question. It's certainly possible. Getting to 0 is the ultimate goal, and I think we all recognize it's going to be virtually impossible to get to 0, because in addition to the implementation of some of the technology that CGA is recommending, we've got attitudes and practices and things like that that have to be changed too. So getting to 0 is going to be difficult. There's still, though, a lot of momentum with our stakeholders, especially now as things are starting to open back up. Folks aren't letting their guard down. Some of the utilities already are doing some things to be proactive in getting data from us and running it through a risk analysis type of software, and then using that to provide extra information to excavators working either near some of their critical facilities, or something about that excavator and the excavator's history, or even in some cases, information about the locator who provided the locates and the history of that locator, using that information as part of their algorithm to identify this could be a problem, so let's try to do more to educate and provide extra resources. Things like that are certainly going to help us move forward. And of course, we at Virginia 811 are very much about what kinds of things can we be looking to as well on the technology side. So the combination of those things, I think, it took us, if I go back to the chart, there we go. Look at how long it took us. We got below 2 in 2008. It took us 12 more years to make that drop from 2 to getting below 1. We got close to 2017, 2018, 2019. We made incremental improvement, but we still couldn't quite get under 1. Perhaps, I don't know, if I were a good prognosticator, I would have won the lottery already and be sitting somewhere else with an umbrella in my drink probably right now. But I think we will get there. It's going to continue to take time and hard work by a lot of folks.
Well, thanks for that answer, Steve. I appreciate it.
Sure. Good to hear your voice. It's been a while.
Any other questions from the crowd? All right, well, we will wrap up this presentation. This will be available on YouTube if you'd like to share with any of your colleagues in the future. Steve, I thank you again for joining us. I think this is a great presentation, and I look forward to having you and maybe some other people join a panel for a future dinner meeting.
Sounds good. Look forward to it.
All right, Steve, thank you very much.
Thank you, and look forward to hearing from you, Ken.